No one noticed the boy, standing at the far end of the shelter, holding a trembling piece of cardboard that read, "Will someone choose me too?" The dogs barked, jumped and wagged their tails, desperate for attention. But not one of them looked at him the way he needed. Because Daniel wasn't calling them with his voice, he couldn't. At 12 years old, Daniel had learned to live in a quiet world, a world without sound, without words spoken out loud. He spoke with his hands, his eyes, and sometimes with signs written on paper. But today, even that didn't seem enough. The shelter was chaotic, full of energy he couldn't hear but could feel. And somehow it made him feel even more alone. He moved slowly past each kennel, lifting his small hands, signing softly, hoping at least one dog would understand. But the dogs only barked louder, jumping at visitors who called their names completely, ignoring the silent boy who had nothing but hope in his eyes. Daniel wasn't just there to adopt a dog, he was there to keep a promise. 6 months ago, his mother, Sarah, had passed away after a long illness. She was the only person who truly understood him, without words, the only one who could read his silence like a language. Before she left, she had gently held his face and whispered something he would never hear, but he saw her lips clearly. "You'll never be alone." After that day, the house felt empty, colder than silence itself. His father, Michael, tried his best, but grief had built a wall between them. They spoke, but never really connected. So Daniel held on to that promise, believing that somewhere, someone or something would come into his life and understand him the way his mother once did. The shelter volunteer. Emily watched Daniel from a distance, her heart quietly breaking. She noticed how carefully he approached each dog, how gently he signed, how patiently he waited. But every time the result was the same. The dogs turned away, distracted by louder voices, stronger gestures and treats offered by other visitors. Daniel's silence made him invisible in a place where noise meant attention. He tried again and again, moving from one kennel to the next, his hopes slowly fading with each step. His shoulders dropped, his movements slowed, and the cardboard sign in his hand began to shake slightly. It wasn't just rejection. It felt like confirmation of his deepest fear that maybe he wasn't meant to be understood at all. At the very end of the shelter, far from the noise and excitement, there was one last kennel. It was darker, quieter, almost forgotten. A small sign hung on it that read, "Luna, not suitable for most homes." Daniel almost walked past it, but something made him stop. Inside sat a thin gray dog with tired eyes and stillness that felt different. She wasn't barking, wasn't jumping, wasn't begging for attention like the others. She just sat there, watching, waiting. For a moment, everything felt calm. Daniel slowly stepped closer and raised his hands, unsure, hesitant. He signed softly, the same words he had shown every other dog. "Hi, I'm Daniel." Luna didn't bark. She didn't move right away, but her eyes locked onto his hands. For the first time that day, a dog wasn't ignoring him. Daniel felt his heart skip a fragile spark of hope, rising again. He signed again, slower this time, more carefully, his fingers trembling slightly. And Luna tilted her head. Not out of confusion, but attention, Emily rushed over, noticing something she hadn't seen before. "That's Luna," she said gently to Michael, who had just caught up with his son. "She was rescued from a bad situation. She doesn't respond to sound. We think she might be deaf." Michael looked at Daniel, then at Luna, and something clicked. Daniel didn't hear the explanation, but he didn't need to. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the only one living in silence. Daniel dropped his cardboard sign. He didn't need it anymore. He stepped closer to the kennel and placed his hand softly against the glass. Luna stood up, slowly walked forward and placed her paw against his hand on the other side. No barking, no noise, just connection. Michael felt tears rise in his eyes as he watched his son smile for the first time in months. A real smile, full of warmth and life. The decision was made, without a single word. They chose each other. The first days at home were not easy, but they were beautiful. Daniel and Luna were both learning, both adapting, both trying to understand each other's movements, emotions, and rhythms. Daniel created small hand signals, just for Luna, teaching her what each movement meant. And Luna learned quickly, responding not to sound but to sight, to feeling, to presence. For the first time since his mother passed, Daniel didn't feel alone in the silence. Because Luna didn't need words either. One evening during a crowded family gathering, Daniel felt overwhelmed. Even without hearing the movement, the vibrations, the chaos around him became too much. His chest tightened, his breathing became uneven. He slipped away quietly, sitting alone in the backyard, tears rolling down his cheeks. Moments later, Luna appeared. She walked up to him gently and rested her head on his lap, her presence calm, steady, grounding. Daniel placed his hands on her fur, closing his eyes, letting the world fade away. In that silence, he felt understood again. Months later, Daniel returned to the same shelter. But this time he wasn't alone. He stood beside Luna, confident, stronger, holding a new sign. It read, "Some of us don't need sound to understand love." People stopped. They watched. They felt something. Emily smiled through tears, realizing that the quietest connection had become the loudest message. Daniel looked at Luna, then back at the people, and for the first time he didn't feel invisible. Sometimes the world is too loud for us to truly listen. We look for connection in words, in noise, in attention, but the deepest understanding often lives in silence. Daniel and Luna didn't find each other because they were perfect. They found each other because they felt the same loneliness and chose to stay. And maybe the people who feel the most unheard are the ones who understand love the most.